Level 1 is done. We are novices no more. With the experience we gained from the first level, with the knowledge we now arm ourselves with, it's time to fine-tune our abilities and take you further towards mastering the game of poker. What started as potential could just change your life. Let's begin level 2 with the art form that is betting.
I'm all in.
There's no right or wrong way to play poker. There's not one method that will guarantee success, but there are ways and means for you to maximize your chances of winning. There are good habits and bad habits. There are situations to avoid and situations to seek. And there are those who have the knowledge to exploit them. We're going to teach you how to master the game, from the basics to the advanced.
Welcome to Level 2, ladies and gents. You should now be a competent player. In Level 1, we learnt the value of starting hands, the importance of position, the art of bluffing, and we took our first look at tournament strategy. Now Level 2 begins with a closer look at betting. You thought it was simple. Well, there's more to it than meets the eye, a lot more. And in this show, we'll study the reasons to bet in detail. This series looks at poker played all over the planet, but today we're going to look at some great examples of good and bad betting and folding from Las Vegas, Baden, the Bahamas, and Sydney. Analysis comes from Joe Hasham, the 2005 World Series of Poker champ, and the one and only Mr. Daniel Negreanu. As usual, we'll break down some more poker lingo in the terminology section, plus we'll hear some pearls of wisdom from the wizards of the felt. But first, we begin with a tutorial, so let's look at the purpose of bets.
Any bet you make should have a purpose. If it doesn't, it's probably a bad bet. There are 4 main purposes of betting: gaining value, protecting your hand, bluffing, and gaining information. Gaining value is the most basic and straightforward aim of a bet. If you think you have the best hand and your opponent might call, you increase the size of the pot that you will likely win. Protecting your hand can be very important as well. If you think you're ahead in the hand, but there is a strong possibility that your opponent can make the better hand after the next street, you should bet to force your opponents out. The third purpose is to bluff your opponent. When you can't win the hand with the cards you have, the only way to win is to bluff. Gaining information. Sometimes a player will place a bet not to gain value, not to protect their hand, not to bluff, but purely to see how their opponent will react. Placing a bet can often reveal a lot of information about your opponents and their hands. Imagine you're this guy and you're thinking one of these things. I think the opponent might not have anything. I don't know where I stand. I think I'm ahead. It's okay to think these things, but go back to the 4 reasons to bet. Ask yourself, by betting, do I gain value? Do I protect my hand? Can I possibly bluff my opponents out? Am I gaining more information by betting than by checking? If the answer to all of them is no, you shouldn't bet. It's that simple. Don't bet when there's no purpose. It's a desperate move from a desperate player. Let's have a look at some examples and figure out if there are reasons to bet or not. In this example, Bandit 2000 has ace-king offsuit and his flop top pair. He should bet to protect his hand, as any 8 would give Dougie T2 pair, and any 6 would give him 3 of a kind. In this next example, Slavin calls the pre-flop raise from Marvin with 9-10. Calling out of position leaves him in a sticky situation. He flops middle pair and bets 700 to try and gain information about where he stands. Marvin, who is in position, calls with top pair. Betting out into the pre-flop raiser with middle pair isn't advised, but once Slavin has made the bet and was called, he should have realized that his hand is unlikely to be ahead. In this case, Slavin keeps betting, making life very easy for Marvin, who wins a nice pot with top pair. The message here is if you bet out for information, take heed of your opponent's reaction to the bet and act accordingly. Recap.
That's your lot for now. Always remember, if you're going to bet, there has to be a purpose. You can bet to gain value, to protect your hand, to bluff, or to gain information. If you don't have a reason to bet, don't bet. So you've made it through to level 2. Congratulations. Let's take a brief look at what we've covered and what's still to come. Everything you wanted to know about poker is divided into 2 levels. Back in level 1, the novice level, we dedicated the shows towards helping you pick up the basics. We learnt the power of position and the value of starting hands. Now that we've completed the level, you should be a competent player with a good grasp of the game and all its mechanics. Now, this is the start of level 2, the experience level, in which we'll cover getting information from your opponents, playing styles, and the nuances of playing hands dependent on their strength and potential. Today's show is the first of 2 dedicated to the subject of betting. In the next show, we look at the skill of sizing your bets in more detail. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Time to concentrate further on the reasons why you should bet as we open the vault.
In the earlier tutorial, we explained that every bet you make should have a purpose. Here are a couple examples from the archives to show this in practice. First, we head on over to the PokerStars Caribbean Adventure. Dan Highmiller, holding ace-4 offsuit, opens the betting with a raise. Benny Chen, sitting on the button with a pair of 6s, calls the raise and the 2 players see a flop. It's a low flop of 2, 9, 5, all clubs. Highmiller is first to act and checks. Chen makes a small bet of 67,000 into 154,000 pot. This is clearly a bet made to gain information as to the strength of his opponent's hand. Benny can decide whether his pair of 6s is the best hand depending on the reaction of Dan Highmiller to this bet. Highmiller, who only has ace high, now raises to 140,000. As covered earlier, this is another reason to bet, to bluff. Highmiller is confident that he does not have the best hand right now, but feels that Benny's hand isn't strong enough to call a raise. Now Chen, with the better hand, falls for the bluff and presumes he is beat, and folds. Now we fly on over to Baden in Austria, where we see old schoolers Jörg Weber and Mel Judah on the feature table in Series 3 of the European Poker Tour. Weber raises pre-flop with ace-jack suited, and Judah calls with a pair of 8s. The flop is a low one again. Weber bets his flush draw and overcards, and the decision is back with Mel Judah. He decides to make a big raise. The purpose of this bet is simple. Because the flop cards are all lower than an 8, he feels he has the best hand at this point, and his bet is made to protect his hand against overcards and draws. Weber holds both overcards and a flush draw, but doesn't want to risk a lot of chips without a made hand, and so folds. The bet succeeded in protecting Judah's hand, and he wins a nice pot.
So, want to be a success at the tables?
Can't show aces every hand.
Don't play with me.
Because then when I raise the kings, you'll know I'm weak.
Nice hand.
Just snap me off on jack high.
One time in my life.
Well, you better learn the lingo. Here's some cool terms for betting. 3-bet. You're making a 3-bet when you make a second raise or re-raise. Before the flop, the blinds are considered the first bet, the raise is the second bet, and the re-raise would be the third bet, or 3-bet. Post-flop, there are no blinds, so the first bet is made by the person who first put their chips into the pot. The second bet is a raise, and the third bet, or 3-bet, is a re-raise. Got that? I hope so. All the cool kids say it. 4-bet. As you can imagine, the 4-bet follows the same principle as the 3-bet. To 4-bet is basically to make a re-raise. In this example, the highlighted player has made a 4-bet. Triple barrel. To triple barrel is to bet out into the pot 3 times after the flop, turn, and river card. It either means the player has a very strong hand or they're just very stubborn and refuse to give up on the bluff. String bet. A string bet is an illegal move in poker. It occurs when a player puts in the chips to call or raise and then adds more chips straight after as they attempt to make the bet. This isn't allowed as bets in poker, whether they're a call or raise, need to be made in one continuous action. check raise. A check raise is a raise from a player who is originally checked. Here, player A checks after the flop, player B makes a bet, and then player A makes a raise. So player A has check raised. I love player A, he's awesome. C-bet, otherwise known as the continuation bet. Generally, if you bet pre-flop, you should continue to bet post-flop. Failing to do so is a sure sign of weakness. We covered this in show 5. Have you been paying attention? Value bet. A value bet is a bet generally made after the river card, when you're confident you have the winning hand. It's a bet made to extract as many chips as possible from your opponent, who's holding an inferior hand.
If you want to learn more about poker, go to PokerStars.com.
Let's take time to examine one hand in detail now. Joe Hasham is in the analyst chair looking at value bets.
Today we're going to talk about the importance of value betting. A value bet is a bet that you make to induce a call from your opponent so you can extract chips from them. So in this hand, we see Ray raise it to 150 with a pair of aces, the best possible hand, and Mr. Razor out of the small blind calls with King Jack. King Jack is a sort of hand that can get him into trouble. Let's see what the flop brings. So the flop comes Jack high. Mr. Razor believes he has the best hand. He's got a pair of jacks with a king kicker, so it's not too bad. He elects to bet 220. Ray with a pair of aces definitely dominates a pair of jacks at this stage. Elects just to call and see what the turn brings. The turn is a 7 of clubs, a pretty harmless card. Now Mr. Razor decides that he will check and see what Ray does. Ray bets 500 chips. Mr. Razor calls. The river card is a 6 of diamonds. Mr. Razor checks. Now Ray needs to make a decision. At this point, Ray is thinking to himself that if he bets the correct amount, he'll get the call. If he bets too much, Mr. Razor will fold and he'll miss out on those chips. Ray decides that 800 is the perfect amount to bet. Mr. Razor calls and sees the bad news. Ray wins the hand.
Good advice there from the big man. Let's get some more from a Great Dane. It's all about the bet size.
Sizing your bet is a very personal thing, and it goes to the player. You have to look at the player and think, how well do I want him to call? Do I want him to fold? What in my story, how big can I make this bet if I want him to call? And then maybe I want to cheat him with an overbet. And you have to find out what this person will do. That's a very tough one.
One of the big things you look for when you're trying to determine if your opponent has a hand or not is the bet sizing. People fall into traps, that's just what they do. People will bet bigger on good hands and lower on bad hands, but other people do different things. And if you play with someone long enough, which it only takes a few hours, you can figure out what their bet sizing means.
Time for a break now, but before we go, a question. Consider this situation. You have ace of spades, 10 of diamonds, and have raised pre-flop to 300 with the blinds at 50 and 100. You get one caller, and then the flop comes. Ace of hearts, jack of spades, 9 of hearts. You're first to act, so what should you do? We'll give you the answer after the break. Welcome back. Before the break, we asked you what you should do if you're holding ace-10 offsuit and the flop is ace-jack-9. The pot is 750. Well, there's no definitive right or wrong answer, but it's generally accepted that you should bet in this situation, partially to gain value, but also to protect your hand from draws and the like. But how much to bet? The right side to bet in this situation is around 60% of the pot, so a bet of around 450 would be appropriate. If the bet's too small, it enables other players to see more cards for very little money. It also gives you little information about the strength of your opponent's hand. If the bet's too large, it forces players out that have inferior hands, meaning the opportunity to win some extra precious chips has gone. We'll have a look at bet sizing in more detail in the next show. Sometimes the best bet is to not bet at all. Yep, ladies and gents, the fold is key when it comes to success at the table, as Christian will now explain. Take it away, Christian.
Nice one, Nat. Ah, the fold. Card rooms are full of stories of folding. Whether you believe the stories or not, a good fold can leave you agonizing for hours. With a call, you know instantly if it's the right choice. With a fold, you might never find out. It's painful. Quite often, it's the correct decision to make. Check this out. Nothing beats calling a bet with low pair. Sniffing out a bluff is pure poker gold. But under the radar, with no glitz or fanfare, lies the unsung skill, the art of the fold. Looking down at your flush with a pair on the board. Your stomach churns from the price you might pay. Making a mistake that you can ill afford? Do you have the talent to throw it away? Poker history is full of flash in the pans. Anyone can run good in one tourney and win. But next time, they may not get such good hands. Consistent winners have the courage within. To fold their aces, two pair or low straight, they discover a tell or a sense of a read. Their foe itches for them to take the bait, but they go with their instincts, and it's there they succeed. So if your goal in poker is to become a top pro, take your time, don't rely on fortune or luck. Never be afraid to let your hand go. If something tells you you're beat, throw your cards in the muck. Yeah.
Well, that told us. Vault time now as we take a look at some disciplined folds. We visit Sydney first in a hand between Canada's Sol Berggren and the Australian Grant Levy. Berggren is first to make a move and raises to 75,000 with King-Queen offsuit. Levy, in the big blind, calls with Ace-7 suited.
Well, out of the blind with Ace-7 of diamonds, you definitely want to see a flop.
The flop gives Levy the nut flush draw. The turn gives both players a straight draw. Levy bets 60,000, and Berggren calls. As the ace hits on the river, Levy's top pair could look great on first inspection.
That card has just made Levy a pair of aces, but more importantly, Berggren just made the ace-high straight. He has what we call the nuts.
But although he's been in front all hand, he shows the discipline to lay it down to Berggren's bet of 200,000.
Confused a little bit by this bet. He just made his ace.
Good flop.
Wow.
And he folds and shows the ace.
That's a very, very well-played hand there by Levy. He bet his draw on the turn, trying to hit the flush, missed it on the river.
Big draw.
Smart enough to lay it down.
A great fold considering he probably suspected he was ahead throughout the hand. The next example shows real discipline pre-flop. Taken from the EPT event in Baden in Season 4, it pits a young Sebastian Ruthenberg against Sweden's David Sonnelin. Ruthenberg is holding pocket rockets and makes a standard raise to about 3 big blinds. David Sonnelin has queens, nice, and he re-raises Ruthenberg to 50,000. Before the decision gets back to Ruthenberg, Norway's Argus Spets looks down to find pocket tens. Not bad at all. But in the face of a raise and a re-raise, Arga is smart enough to know a middling pair like tens doesn't play that well, and shows the discipline to lay it down.
That's a tight fold. That's a tight fold.
But the fold we really want to highlight is this one. Ruthenberg figures he doesn't want to get too cute with the aces and pushes all in.
I'm on it.
And Sonnelin is faced with a big decision. Ask yourself, could you fold pocket queens? Well, the best players can fold the big hands. Wary of aces, kings, or ace-king, Sonnelin throws them away. Discipline is what you need in poker.
Time for the pro analysis now, as our man Daniel Negreanu takes a look at a hand starring one of our favorite players, Daniel Negreanu.
Well, in this next hand, we're gonna discuss the art of folding. Not something I do too often, but in this spot, it made a lot of sense. We're gonna look at an NAPT hand from the Venetian between myself and one John Hennigan. Let's take a look. The blinds are 1 in 200 with an ante. So I've got king, queen offsuit, so I'm gonna go ahead and raise to 475. And John Hennigan is going to defend his big blind with 9-8 offsuit. It's a small raise, so he decides he wants to see a flop. So that's a great flop, as you can see, for John, because he's got a pair of 8s and he's got an open-ended straight flush draw. As for me, I've got 2 overcards and just the straight draw. So I can catch a 9 or an ace to make a straight, but obviously, as you can see by the percentages, John Hennigan is way in front here, a 3-to-1 favorite. Action's gonna be on him first, and he checks it on over to me. And the way he checked and the amount of time he took, something about it made me feel like, you know, this is a flop that he very well might hit. So I decided to check behind for a couple reasons. One, you know, I didn't think I was gonna get away with a bet on the flop as a bluff. And 2, I wanna give myself a free chance to catch my straight, because I can still catch that straight and take the, you know, and have the best hand, so. Well, there you go, what do you know? Now the turn card has given John 2 pair and an open and straight flush draw. That's a pretty big hand. However, he's well behind me because now I've got the straight. You see the percentage flip. He went from a 3-to-1 favorite, now I'm at 70% to win the hand. Now he's obviously gonna check here. So with 12.25 in the pot, the question for me is, what's the right bet size? I bet 1,000, which is a pretty good bet. It's about 80% of the pot. If he's gonna draw to a club, I wanna make sure that he pays a big price for it. And he does make the call. Now the river pairs the board. As you can see, John Hennigan has a full house, but I don't know that yet. Remember, you don't get to see the whole cards while you're playing live. So there's 32.25 in the pot, and action's on me after John's checked. Well, stop it right there for just a second. Now when John checks here, I figure there's a decent chance he might just have a queen for a straight, so he might call a bet. Now what I decided to do here was bet a big bet. There's 3,225 in the pot, I bet 3,500. What that does is it what's called polarizes my range, which means I either have a really big hand or I've got a bluff, okay? There's really no mediocre hands that I'm gonna make that bet with. Now the reason I do this is because I know that if John check raises me here, he's only gonna do that if he can beat a really good hand, right? Because if he's got a hand that beats a bluff, like just the queen, he's not gonna raise me. Why would he wanna do that? It looks like I have a big hand myself, so it makes it an easier decision for me if he does check raise to actually fold the hand. Let's see what he does. He obviously is gonna raise here. He's made his full house. He's got me to bet. And he's raised it up to 10-5. So I bet 3,500, he's raised me 7,000 more, and I have to figure, okay, like I said, my hand is pretty clear. It's either really strong or nothing. If he has any hand in between that area, he's gonna call. That's what he's gonna do. For him to raise, he's only gonna raise with completely nothing as a bluff or a really big hand. But we know he can never have completely nothing. It's not possible. Not with that board. 8, 9, 10 jack with 3 clubs, he's got something. We all know this. So for him to raise here, it's an absolute fold based on all the things that I've said. He cannot be bluffing based on my bet size and the whole thing. So the art of folding a lot of times comes into play when you're thinking about the right bet size. And in this case, I want to make sure I bet it in such a way that I wouldn't get bluffed. For example, had I only bet 1,400, he might have raised me 5,000 and I wouldn't know what to do.
All right, I'll take a wild guess. Jack 9 of diamonds. Can't beat it.
So essentially here, the art of folding was really defining my hand so that I could easily define his. With my bet size on the river, I knew that if he raised me, he was never gonna do it with any hand that he can call with, and he can never have nothing, so what does that tell you? He's got my straight beat.
If you want to watch the show again, recap previous episodes, or join the series at a more advanced level, then go to everythingpoker.com.
So you've had your first taster of level 2, and while it might not be everything you wanted to know about poker, we have covered the 4 reasons to bet: gaining value, protecting your hand, bluffing, and gathering information. And we looked at the ability to make a disciplined fold when the information gathered suggests you're beaten.
To practice all you've learned in the show today, go to PokerStars.com and follow the simple instructions for downloading the free software. Once on the site, this week's task is to play a sit-and-go tournament and consider the reasons why you bet before you do it. Analyze your own game, and you will quickly see the results.
Here's what's coming up next time. We look at betting again, but in more detail, paying close attention to the size of the bet you make. Daniel Negreanu shows us how it's done as he spars online. We review action from EPT London, and finally, we return to the Bahamas, where we hear more priceless insight from David Williams, Joe Hashim, Fatima De Mello, and Luca Pagano. All coming up in the next show. Do not miss it. This is the greatest card game on the planet, ladies and gents. Let's master it together.